In the field of education, we love to say that behavior is communication, but then we treat the whole process like it's guesswork. In this video, I will teach you how to analyze the numbers of FBA data to truly determine the function of behavior, learn how to observe students and know exactly what to look for, and turning data into information that actually works. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Rachel from the Behavior Check-In. I'm a behavior special education teacher turned behavior specialist, and I work in a K-12 setting, helping real teachers in real classrooms with strategies that actually work. So when I go out to observe students, I make sure to schedule plenty of time. I like to watch the entire block because I like to watch all the transitions and everything that is happening. I also do multiple observations because sometimes kids know you're there and they act differently. And also sometimes teachers, well, they definitely know you're there and they act differently. So you don't always get a real picture of what's going on. So the more observations you do and the longer that you watch, you start to see people fall more into their natural patterns. That is students and teachers. And that actually helps you truly determine the function of behavior plan so that you can develop a plan that works. So when I schedule my observations and let teachers know that I'm coming out, one of the big things I always let them know is I want them to be completely natural in how they do things every single day. I am not here to judge their teaching. I'm not here to evaluate them. I just want to see what's happening. Now, yes, there may be some things that teachers are doing that are leading to behaviors, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're like a bad teacher. But we don't know what we don't know. And if the teacher doesn't realize they're doing something that's accidentally triggering a student, then they're going to keep doing it and then wondering why the behavior is not getting better instead of maybe adjusting some things in the room to make it a little bit easier or more likely that we don't see that behavior occur in the future. So what do I track when I'm in these observations? So I love to first start out with ABC data. That is antecedent, behavior, consequence, and then I note the outcome. So I am very just like, what I see is what I put down. I don't put any feeling into it. It's just very observable information. And I try to be as descriptive as possible because this helps me after the fact go over and analyze patterns that I am seeing. I like to note the time and context. So when things start, when they end, the type of activities. So antecedents could be directions. It could be like splitting into groups. It could be a transition. It could be having to get out their Chromebooks and do like a learning platform. It could be a writing task. You get it. But I like to notice all of those so that I can see those patterns. Behaviors don't happen in isolation. There is always something that leads up to the behavior, an antecedent, for example. So behaviors sometimes get a bad rap because we think it's all like something bad, but behavior is what everybody does. So for example, I walked into my house the other day and it was really, really hot. So that was kind of the setting event, the trigger, right? So I went over and turned on my air conditioner. My behavior was that it was hot in my house, so I went over and turned on my AC. It is as simple as that. If I was lacking the skill of understanding that when the room is hot, I need to turn on the air conditioner, I may get really agitated, irritated, sweaty, annoyed, and I might even have some sort of a meltdown because I don't have the skill to know that I need to turn on the air conditioner or ask someone in my family to turn on the air conditioner. So when we look at behavior, it really is something that a student is doing or a person is doing to help them get a need met. And sometimes those behaviors are appropriate, like asking for someone to turn on the air conditioner, and sometimes those behaviors are not as appropriate and can be not pro-social behaviors because the kid doesn't have a better replacement skill for it, and that could be having a meltdown or tearing apart the room because they can't explain that they feel uncomfortable and miserable and they need help. So if we understand the behavior, then we know that we need to go in and teach them how to request turning on the air conditioner. So when I write down the behaviors, I write exactly what I see, what the student says, how their body language is, if they're fidgeting in their seat, see what I'm seeing in those moments, what kind of things are they doing? And then the consequences are what happens afterwards. So the consequences helps me understand why they're doing the behavior. So let's just say, for example, a teacher asks a student to get out their Chromebook. The student starts to argue. The teacher follows through in the argument. There's a back and a forth and a back and the forth, and they argue for 15 minutes, and then the block is up, and then the kid didn't have to do the assignment. That's a really easy basic one, but I can infer at that point that the student was trying to escape having to do the work, and they used the power struggle or accessing the adult, the arguing, to be able to avoid that activity. So that would help me develop a plan on how I could coach the teacher to help the student be able to start their work without losing the entire block, or help them come up with different strategies to support them so that maybe they weren't so overwhelmed. I would look at all those patterns and we break it down. I also like to track frequency. So how often is a behavior occurring? Are they blurting out all the time? Are they out of their seat all the time? Those kinds of things. I think that is really important to track, because we're not going to extinguish the behavior right out the door. Like, behavior change are something that is developed and reinforced over time. So we're going to have to keep practicing this skill until it becomes a habit for the student. One thing that I really like to do is make sure that we're tracking that frequency, we're graphing that frequency, because that helps us see trends, and we can note, oh, okay, the student is starting to understand the intervention that we are doing is working, because based off of their baseline, let's say that they were blurting out 15 times in a 30-minute class block, and now we're down to 8 times. That is showing that we are having a decrease in that behavior, and we're moving more into our replacement behavior. You can also track how often they use the replacement behaviors, such as using a break card, using a hand signal, all those things. So in that case, we'd want to see maybe that increase. So we'd see the difference between how many times they blurt out and how many times that they take a break, or that sort of thing. I also like to track intensity for the same reason, because a behavior such as a tantrum or a meltdown may initially go on for 2 hours, but over time, if we're putting these interventions in place and we start noticing that we're going from 2 hours, maybe down to 90 minutes, down to 60 minutes, and so on, we can see the decrease of these behaviors, and that can help us know that the intervention is working. Because often with behavior, because behaviors can be triggering to us and trigger our own behaviors, it can be really hard if you don't have the data to truly understand if the intervention is working. You can just feel like it's not, because it's still there and it's still impeding your classroom, and you can be like, no, it's not working, it didn't go away. But that's not how behavior works. Behavior takes time. It's sort of like, think about when you try to do a new habit of going to the gym. It's going to take consistency and probably a month of you going to the gym every day during the week before it just becomes something that you want to do all the time and just a part of who you are. The same thing works for kids and how they learn those replacement skills. So we have to be patient and mindful of that when we are shaping behavior and understanding our data. I also like to look at on-task and off-task percentages, because that's another thing that's measurable that we can track. And of course, if we can see that the student is off task a lot, and then we get to the point where we're increasing their on task behavior, that's a win as well. A big one is how many positive statements are made versus how many corrections. This is something that I think all educators don't realize that we do. When we have a behavior, it can become scary and really overwhelming and frustrating and all of the things. And we can even start our day off with our class like, okay, here comes the student, they're going to do this thing that's going to derail my class. Our anxiety starts to take over. This has happened to me, so I'm not speaking of anybody in general. This is just my own personal experience. And then we can start getting into a headspace where all we see is the negative and all we start doing is correcting. And we aren't giving positive praise when we see positive behaviors. So it's really important to track that. We want to make sure that we're giving positive behavior specific praise, especially when we're really in the learning phase, the teaching phase of how we want this child to change their behaviors. We want to give them that positive reinforcement to increase the likelihood of them continuing that behavior. So if you only praise them a couple times initially and then move on like, oh, that's expected, that's what they should be doing, you're not going to be reinforcing it. It needs to be continual. And with some students, it needs to be very, very frequent. It just depends on their personality. But that's one thing you can note when you're taking that data. Is the student that needs a lot of that praise? Some of them do, especially our attention-seeking behaviors. They want that attention. They want any kind of attention. And yes, negative attention will work, but positive is definitely more preferable. They're human beings. They want connection and relationships. So positive is ideal. So we want to make sure that we are giving them the positive praise. And you can learn with the child on how that's a direct thing or if that's more of an indirect thing. But it's important to look at those two things. So synthesizing and understanding the data. So after I've done several blocks of observing the student and I feel like I have a really good picture of what their behavior looks like, I've interviewed the teacher, they have said, yeah, this is pretty accurate, I feel confident, then I like to sit down and look at my data and try to understand what's going on, look at patterns on how we can develop replacement behaviors to help this student. So I like to highlight repeating antecedents and consequences. I like to look at patterns that jump out, like every time there's a multi-step direction with no visuals, the behavior increases. Or every time that the student has to sit for long periods of time, the behavior increases. Those are all things that tell a story and help me determine how we can help that student and what that behavior is trying to communicate. Lots of multi-step directions without visuals could overwhelm a child and then they have no clue what they're doing and now they feel like they're gonna fail, and then we see a behavior from that. So if we can break that down in a way that's manageable so they don't feel confused and they understand and they feel successful, then we should be seeing a decrease in the behavior that we would like to decrease. So understanding that really does tell me where we need to intervene and what interventions we need to put in place. So deciding the function, this is a big one. So when I'm looking at the function, I look at what is the student consistently getting by doing this behavior. Are they escaping from something that they don't want to do? So we're going back to the escape function. All right, I walk into the hot room. My escape might be to immediately roll out of there because it's uncomfortable and miserable. All right, or something that we don't want to do that's uncomfortable and miserable. That's where escape comes from. And uncomfortable and miserable can be that they find it boring. So we might have to work on the skill of building up their stamina. Another thing can be accessing attention from an adult or peers. And that one can be for lots of variable reasons. It can be because they are bored. Or it could be that they are seeking that connection. There's multiple reasons that one might seek out attention. Seeking out attention is not a bad thing. It gets a bad rap. Oh, they just want attention, like the child's some sort of narcissist. I want us to reframe that. We as human beings all want to be recognized and heard and understood, and children are no different. And when they're seeking out attention, a lot of times that's what they're wanting, is they're wanting that connection, they're wanting that approval, they're wanting that validation. That's where the praise comes in, that sort of thing. That's what they're looking for. And a lot of times when you have a child who's asking for that through those behaviors, they just want to be seen and they want to be validated, and we can teach them how to get that in an appropriate way. So sensory is also a big one. There's a lot of things going on sensory-wise in a classroom that we don't think about. When you have other kids in the room, people tapping, you can have like a loud noise going on from the air conditioner. It can be too hot or too cold. Sometimes like maybe the teacher has a really soft voice and other kids around are kind of chatty and they can't discern the teacher's voice and they have to like really focus in. Maybe they are uncomfortable for whatever reason. There is 1,000 different things, or they've been sitting for too long. That can be also sensory as well. Because for some people who really struggle, sitting can be painful if you sit for too long. Honestly, I'm kind of one of those people. You get to a point and it's like you need to get up and kind of move your body a little bit. And that can be seen a lot for sensory. And then of course there's access to preferred items as well. We can look at that if they want to get to their phone or the computer, or they want access to an adult or peers, whatever. We can also look at that as well. So this is the really fun part for me, is coming up with replacement behaviors and ideas to help support the student. And that's where we're really looking at what we're trying to replace and what's doable in the classroom. So if you have a student who's constantly seeking escape, we might add in breaks, structured breaks, so that they know they have that time coming up, chunking assignments so that things feel more manageable. and requesting those breaks. Attention, teaching students how to ask for attention appropriately, how to request help, those sorts of things is a great way on how to meet that unmet need. Sensory, build sensory breaks in, have sensory friendly corners or options in the classroom, provide headphones, provide fidgets, provide flexible seating, provide movement breaks. Those are all things to help meet the sensory need. If you have a student who is constantly wanting to get on their phone or their computer, then that's one of those things that they can work towards having the option to. It's going to be, if you take it away and kind of have an all or nothing approach with a lot of kids, that's when you're going to get a lot of a meltdown. But if they know, hey, if I complete my work or do this, then I'll have the option to be able to receive the item that I want. So what do we track after we've determined all of this? So frequency, like I talked about earlier, to see if we're increasing the replacement behaviors and decreasing the behaviors that we would like to decrease. Frequency is probably one of my favorite ways to measure data because I feel like it paints the clearest picture for me. So what we want to target is target behavior frequency, replacement behavior frequency, staff fidelity, and any new triggers that come up. So we're looking for trends towards more regulation and access to instruction. So that's how I move from collecting data to truly understanding the data. If you want any templates to make this process easier, I will have them linked below and you can go check them out in my Teachers Pay Teacher store. If you're wanting some of the stuff specifically, I would look at my FBA bundle. That's where I have a lot of my stuff for my observations, my resources, and templates that you can use. And if you found this video helpful, tell me in the comments what part of the FBA process you would like me to break down next in a future video. Once again, thank you so much for coming to my channel. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, share it to anybody who could benefit from it, and if you haven't already, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I will catch you in the next one.